Tonight, we're not beginning with king's battles or grand moments carved into stone. Instead, we're stepping into something far quieter and far closer to you. Small habits, ordinary rules, the kinds of things you follow each day without noticing. As natural as breathing, as familiar as setting something down exactly where it belongs. These rules didn't arrive loudly. They weren't announced or explained. They simply stayed, passed along through time, shaped by long winters, close rooms, shared meals, and lives lived under watchful eyes. And even now, in a world that feels modern and fast, you may recognize them in the way you wait, the way you speak, the way you rest only when it feels allowed. As the night settles around you, the light in the room grows softer. Sounds fade into the background. Your shoulders don't need to hold themselves up anymore. Breathing finds a slower rhythm, one that doesn't rush or demand anything in return. This is a good moment to be exactly where you are. If you feel like it, you might quietly notice where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Not to think about it for long, just to acknowledge the distance and the stillness that connect us for a while. From here, we'll gently wander through the everyday rules of medieval life that never quite left us, not as a lesson, not as an explanation, but as a calm walk through familiar patterns, letting history remain soft at the edges as you rest. That survives without reinforcement. It does not need bells anymore. It exists through repetition, quiet and absolute. You sense that this rhythm once belonged to colder spaces, thicker walls, shared rooms where breath fogged the air. It feels like a memory without images, a discipline shaped by survival rather than choice. Movement followed expectation because hesitation meant discomfort. Even now, in a quieter setting, that logic persists. You adjust, not because you must, but because stopping feels unfamiliar, like breaking an agreement you never consciously made. The space around you offers no resistance. Shadows stay where they are. Light remains muted, pressed flat against surfaces. Within the stillness, time moves without motion. You are not rushed yet. You are not free from direction. Your posture reflects a schedule that once lived in stone corridors and narrow cells, carried forward without its original weight, still firm, still unquestioned. Breath settles into a steady pattern, guided by the same unseen order. You are not thinking about the next action, yet it arrives on its own. This feels less like control and more like alignment, a gentle pressure that keeps everything in place. The cold reinforces it, reminding your body to conserve, to follow what is known rather than explore what is possible. The structure feels protective, even when unnecessary. The quiet allows the sensation to deepen. Without instruction, your body recognizes pauses and continuations. There is comfort in not deciding. The pattern holds you, reducing the need for awareness. It resembles a routine shaped in long winters where predictability meant warmth and deviation carried risk. Even stripped of its origin, the pattern remains intact, functioning without explanation. Nothing interrupts this flow. No sound, no command, no visible authority. Yet the structure governs all the same. You remain within it, neither resisting nor embracing it fully. It simply exists, and you move within its boundaries, steady and unremarkable. In this calm compliance, time passes without announcement, guided by a rule that no longer needs a voice to be obeyed. You move through the day as if stepping across stones set long before you arrived. One task gives way to another without discussion, each segment already shaped, already waiting. The body accepts this pattern, easily adjusting its weight and breath to fit the narrow space allowed. Cold lingers in the air, not sharp, but steady, pressing gently against skin and joints. The light does not rush or retreat, it simply exists, thin and pale, marking time without asking how you feel about it. Work appears, pauses, then returns, not as a decision, but as a condition. Your hands repeat familiar movements, guided more by memory than intention. There is a faint sense that these motions once belonged to someone else, carried across generations like worn tools passed from palm to palm. The sound around you is muted, fabric shifting, wood responding to pressure, breath moving in and out. Nothing demands urgency. The rhythm holds you in place. Between one stretch of effort and the next, there is a brief stillness. Not rest exactly, but a holding pattern. Muscles remain half engaged, ready to resume. This pause feels structured, contained, as if it has rules you did not write. It resembles the kind of waiting that once happened beside stone walls in winter, when stopping too long invited cold deeper into the body. Even without remembering why, you do not linger. The return to work arrives quietly. There is no signal you can hear yet. Your body responds all the same. Shoulders settle into position. Attention narrows. Movements become economical. This repetition carries a strange comfort. Predictability reduces friction. In colder times, uncertainty cost energy, and energy was precious. The habit of conserving effort still hums beneath the surface, shaping how much you give and when you withhold. You notice how hunger, fatigue, and warmth are managed, not indulged. Sensations are acknowledged, then set aside until their assigned moment. Food, when it comes, feels measured rather than abundant. Heat is contained, gathered close, not wasted on wide gestures. These limits do not feel imposed from outside. They feel internal, like rules absorbed so early they no longer feel like rules at all. The day continues in these segments, each one distinct, yet similar, like verses of a chant spoken without sound. There is no sense of progression towards something better or worse, only continuation. This pattern once helped people endure long winters when survival depended on breaking the day into manageable pieces. You sense that same logic at work, even though the threat it answered has thinned into memory. Movement slows, not because of tiredness, but because the structure allows it. When one block ends, another waits patiently. The cold remains consistent, a background presence that encourages steadiness. Too much motion would waste heat, too little would stiffen the body. The balance is subtle, learned through repetition rather than instruction. As light shifts almost imperceptibly, you remain within the same framework. Tasks change, but the container does not. This creates a gentle detachment, as if you are both inside the routine and observing it from a slight distance. The observation does not interrupt the flow. It simply exists alongside it, like a quiet thought that does not ask to be finished. By the time another pause arrives, it feels earned, though you cannot say by what measure. The body recognizes the interval and softens just enough. Breath deepens, hands rest without fully releasing tension. The space between actions feels intentional, even ceremonial, shaped by centuries of repetition that taught people how to last through scarcity and cold. The day does not rush toward an end. It maintains its segmented form, each portion fulfilling its role. You move within it, steady and contained, guided by a rhythm older than choice. In this structure, there is no need to decide what comes next. The sequence holds, carrying you forward with quiet persistence, the way winter days once carried entire lives without ever asking permission. When you pause even briefly, there's a faint musical tension beneath the stillness. Your body settles, yet something remains alert, as if rest itself requires permission. The air feels quiet, but not empty, carrying an old expectation that idleness must be justified. You notice your hands resting without tools, your breath steady and still. There is a subtle awareness, a sense that time is observing you. It does not accuse loudly, it simply exists like a presence near the edge of vision, patient and unmoving. This feeling resembles a memory that does not belong to you alone. It echoes of long winters where warmth was earned through motion, where stillness near the fire was measured and counted. In that distant rhythm, rest was allowed only after certain tasks were completed, certain hours endured. Even the cold seemed to approve effort more than comfort. As you sit, muscles loose but ready, that inherited vigilance lingers, carried quietly through generations that learn survival through constant usefulness. Your surroundings offer no command, yet your body responds as though one might arrive. The room holds steady light, neither harsh nor dim, and no footsteps approach. Still, your posture carries restraint. In colder centuries, eyes were everywhere, not always human, sometimes imagined, sometimes divine. Rest invited scrutiny. You feel that same restrained calm, the kind shaped by watching seasons where inactivity could mean loss. The sensation is not fear, only a gentle pressure, reminding you that rest once had conditions. Warmth reaches you in small, contained ways. A blanket, a layer of clothing, the steady temperature of an enclosed space. In medieval winters, warmth gathered slowly, shared carefully, and leaving work behind could feel undeserved. That knowledge survives as texture rather than thought. You notice how your breathing aligns with the quiet, yet part of you remains attentive as though listening for a signal to rise. The guilt is mild, almost polite, blending into the background like distant wind. There is no clear image attached to this feeling, only an atmosphere. Stone walls that held heat reluctantly, long evenings measured by shadows and fading light. Rest occurred, but it was watched, monitored by routine and belief. Even moments of sitting carried purpose, hands mending, minds counting. As you rest without task, the contrast registers subtly. Your body understands comfort, but your awareness remembers a time when comfort required explanation, especially during the cold months when resources were thin. The sensation does not push you to move, it simply stays steady and familiar. You sense how deeply it is woven into daily rhythm, surviving long after its original need has vanished. Winter once demanded vigilance, firewood, food, daylight, all rationed by necessity. Rest felt safer when justified. That ancient accounting still hums quietly beneath your modern stillness, shaping how rest feels rather than what it means. You remain where you are, supported and unhurried. No consequence follows your stillness. The room does not change, the air does not cool further, yet the habit of readiness persists, softened by time but intact. It resembles a watch kept long after danger has passed. In medieval life, winter nights were endured as much as they were lived, and rest came layered with awareness. That same awareness settles with you, calm but alert. As minutes pass without demand, the sensation becomes easier to notice without reacting to it. You feel how the body can be at ease while the mind stays observant. This dual state once ensured survival through dark seasons. It allowed people to rest without fully surrendering attention. You carry that pattern forward, not as instruction, but as inherited posture. The quiet around you accepts it without judgment, allowing the feeling to exist without needing resolution. Nothing asks you to rise, nothing records your stillness. The sense of being watched fades into something gentler, more like habit than warning. You remain present, supported by warmth and silence. The old rhythm loosens slightly, not through effort, but through continued safety. Rest holds its place beside alertness, as it once did beside the fire in winter halls, where survival and stillness learn to share the same space. You sit with the idea of productivity resting quietly in your mind, not as a tool, but as a measure of worth. It feels inherited, heavy, like a rule learned before language. Effort carries an invisible weight, as if doing less means becoming less. The body senses this, even in stillness, a faint tension in the shoulders, a watchfulness that does not leave. Somewhere deep, work is no longer about survival or warmth, but about permission to exist. The cold outside presses against walls, while inside, the need to justify rest hums softly, steady, and familiar. In the depth of winter, usefulness once meant staying alive through another night. Hands moved because grain needed grinding, wood needed stacking, fires needed feeding. That memory lingers as sensation rather than thought. You feel it when your hands remain idle too long, a subtle unease like leaving embers unattended. Productivity carries the tone of duty, shaped by seasons when inactivity meant hunger. Even without frost on your breath, the rhythm remains. Movement feels virtuous, stillness feels borrowed. The body remembers a time when survival depended on constant readiness, even when nothing immediate demanded it. The moral weight of work settles in quietly, like snow accumulating without sound. You notice it when rest feels undeserved, when pauses carry a trace of apology. The mind does not ask whether effort is needed, only whether enough has been done. This is not urgency, but expectation. A sense of being observed lingers, not by eyes, but by rules absorbed long ago. In winter villages, warmth came from shared labor, and idleness drew attention. That awareness still echoes, turning productivity into proof of belonging, even when the world no longer requires such constant proof. The air feels dense with this inherited pressure, as though effort itself generates heat.
You sense it when tasks are finished, yet satisfaction does not arrive. Completion does not release you. Another motion waits, another obligation forms. Productivity becomes ritual, repeated without clear purpose, like tending a fire already burning well. In colder centuries, fire was life. Letting it die invited disaster. That vigilance remains embedded, transforming activity into something sacred. Work feels clean, almost purifying. Rest, by contrast, feels exposed, as if it must be defended, explained, almost softened by small justifications. Even nourishment once followed this logic. Meals earned through labor tasted different, heavier, more complete. Eating without effort carried suspicion. That sensation still flickers when hunger is met too easily. Productivity wraps itself around appetite, around sleep, around worth.
You sense it in the way tasks align the day, giving shape where silence might feel empty. In winter, shelter structure kept minds steady as much as bodies warm. The pattern persists. Activity organizes thought. Without it, the quiet feels unfamiliar, slightly unsafe, as if something essential has been overlooked. This moral tone does not shout, it whispers. It suggests that effort equals virtue, that motion proves integrity. You feel it most clearly when nothing urgent remains, yet stopping feels wrong. The body stays alert, ready to justify itself. Long ago, winter punished waste. Time unused meant resources lost. That caution survives as instinct. Productivity becomes less about need and more about reassurance. Each completed task offers a brief easing, like tightening a cloak against cold air. The relief does not last, but the habit remains, reinforced by centuries of repetition. Outside, the season once dictated everything. Short days demanded efficiency. Light was precious, darkness unforgiving. Those conditions shaped a belief that time itself must be honored through use. You carry that belief quietly, even when light is artificial and warmth effortless. Productivity feels ethical because it once was. It preserved lives, maintained order, kept fear contained. The sensation lingers as a background hum, guiding behavior without instruction. You do not question it, you feel it, a gentle pressure urging movement, offering comfort through structure rather than necessity. As you remain still, this understanding settles without resolution. Productivity continues to feel moral, not because it is required, but because it has been inherited through sensation. The body accepts it as truth, the way it accepts cold before thought intervenes. You notice the calm that follows, acknowledgement, not action. The pressure does not vanish, but it softens. Like winter memories held in the bones, it remains present without demand. The room stays quiet, the air steady. Effort pauses without apology, even as its echo stays close, familiar, and unchallenged. You speak the words before thought arrives. The sound leaves your mouth gently shaped by habit rather than intention. A small release of air from someone nearby, and the response appears familiar, practiced, unquestioned. Your body recognizes the moment faster than your mind does. The room remains unchanged. The air stays cool. Nothing follows the words, and yet the response carries weight, as though it were meant to guard against something unseen, something that once mattered enough to deserve a ritual. The phrase settles into the space between you and the other person. It does not ask for belief. It does not require understanding. It simply exists, resting there like a worn object passed from hand to hand across centuries. In the colder parts of the year, when breath is visible and the body feels more fragile, the words seem heavier. They linger longer in the air, shaped by a memory that no longer has a clear outline, only a feeling of caution. There is a quiet sense that the body once feared interruptions like this, a sharp breath, an uncontrolled sound, a moment when warmth escaped too quickly. The reaction feels older than language, older than comfort. You do not feel alarm, yet your body responds as if acknowledging a small breach in order. The room stays still, light remains soft. The moment passes without consequence, but the response feels necessary all the same. In colder seasons, when rooms are closed tight and air moves slowly, small sounds draw more attention. A cough, a shuffle of feet, a breath taken too deeply. The body seems to remember that survival once depended on noticing these things. You sense that the phrase you speak belonged to a time when illness moved quietly through shared spaces, when breath carried more than warmth, and words were used as shields, however thin. The act feels communal, even when you are alone. It connects you briefly to another presence, real or imagined. You do not pause to wonder where the habit began. The response feels automatic, like pulling fabric tighter around the shoulders when the temperature drops. It offers no solution, no protection you can measure, yet it remains. The body accepts it as part of staying balanced within a space shared with others. There is no urgency in the moment, no fear follows the sound, and still the response comes, gentle and reflexive. It feels like placing something back where it belongs, restoring a quiet symmetry. The breath steadies, the room returns to its previous rhythm. Whatever tension existed dissolves without effort. The phrase does not demand acknowledgement, it does not ask to be answered, it simply completes the exchange. In the depth of winter, when days shorten and the body listens more closely to itself, small rituals take on greater importance. The warmth of breath, the sound of fabric moving, the quiet reassurance of familiar words. These things help maintain a sense of order when the world outside feels distant and hard. You sense that the habit survived because it asks so little. A brief sound, a moment of attention, nothing more. The words carry no clear image, no defined belief. They function like a soft boundary, marking a moment and allowing it to pass without disturbance. You do not feel watched, you do not feel judged, yet the action feels correct, as if leaving it undone would create a small imbalance. The body prefers completion even when the reason has faded into something indistinct and distant. The air remains cool against your skin. The sound of breathing returns to its previous pattern. The space holds steady. You notice how quickly the body moves on, satisfied that the response has been given. There is comfort in this predictability, in knowing that some gestures remain reliable, even when their origins have softened into memory rather than knowledge. The habit does not interrupt your rest. It blends into it, becoming part of the background rhythm of shared spaces and quiet hours. You do not reflect on it further. There is no need. The response has done its work, however undefined that work may be. You sit within a pause so small it almost disappears, yet it leaves a faint trace in the air. After the word is spoken, after the sound passes, there is a brief stillness that feels practiced rather than accidental. The space is not empty, it holds the echo of something older than intention. Breath settles again, muscles loosen without instruction. Nothing important changes, and that is precisely why the moment exists. It does not demand attention, it only confirms that a pattern has been fulfilled. In colder places long ago, such pauses mattered. When winter pressed itself against walls and windows, silence carried weight. A room would hold its breath between sounds, listening for danger, illness, or the crack of ice. You sense a distant memory of that awareness, not as fear, but as attentiveness. The quiet after a small disturbance allowed the body to check itself, to confirm warmth still lingered, that movement could safely resume. The pause does not invite thought. It does not ask for meaning. It is simply there, like the moment between footsteps on packed earth. You feel it pass through you without resistance. The shoulders remain where they are. The eyes continue to focus on nothing in particular. Somewhere inside, an older rhythm recognizes the signal. Interruption acknowledged, balance restored. Whatever was briefly unsettled is allowed to return to its place around you. Life does not wait. It never has. In older winters, tasks resumed quickly because cold tolerated no hesitation. Hands returned to work, to mending, to stirring, to carrying weight from one place to another. The body learned that survival depended on continuity. Small rituals punctuated the day. To stop it, but to keep it moving without fracture. You carry that inheritance quietly, even when there is no frost on the floor. The silence feels familiar because it has been repeated across countless rooms and seasons. A cough, a stumble, a sneeze, each followed by a beat of stillness. The body listens inward, then outward. No alarm follows, no command arrives. That is enough. The moment closes itself. You do not decide to move on. Movement simply resumes as if it had been waiting just behind the pause. There is comfort in how brief it is. Prolonged silence would suggest threat or loss. This one reassures instead. It tells you the system is intact. Heat remains in the limbs. Breath remains steady. The world continues to hold. In older shelters, such confirmation mattered more than words. You sense that same reassurance even here, where the walls are thicker and the cold less personal. The ritual does not linger because it was never meant to. It exists to mark a boundary so small it can be crossed without noticing. You step over it without effort. The mind does not follow. It stays loose, unburdened by explanation. The pause has done its work. It is stitched one moment to the next without tearing the fabric of the day. In winter, days were long, and repetition was a form of warmth. Each completed cycle reduced uncertainty. Each familiar gesture made the hours predictable enough to endure. You feel that legacy in the way the pause resolves itself. There is no relief, no gratitude, no reflection, only continuation. The body understands that dwelling would waste energy better used elsewhere. Sound returns gradually, not as an intrusion, but as a background hum that never fully left. Footsteps, breath, the soft movement of fabric, all reassert themselves. The silence did not remove them, it only thinned them for a moment. You remain where you are, unchanged, yet subtly realigned, like a tool set back into its proper place after brief use. Nothing in you marks this as special. That is the point. Rituals that survive are the ones that do not announce themselves. They slip between actions and disappear before they can be questioned. This one leaves no residue. It does not ask to be remembered. It has already been absorbed into the shape of living. You continue without noticing the exact instant when the pause ends. There is no clear edge. One moment leans into the next. The rhythm holds. Somewhere deep, an old pattern settles back into rest, satisfied that its signal was sent and received. The silence has passed, and with it, the need to acknowledge it at all. You eat using tools once feared, now unquestioned. Your hands close around simple objects, shaped to meet the mouth, cool to the touch, faintly metallic, or worn smooth by years of contact. The weight of them is familiar, balanced, accepted without pause. Food rests quietly before you, giving off muted warmth against the colder air of the room. You do not think about how these tools arrived here, only that they separate skin from heat, grease from fingers, hunger from haste. The motion feels ordinary, rehearsed, as if it has always belonged to you. The room holds the kind of chill that settles into stone and timber during long winters. Breath moves softly, barely visible, while the food offers a brief contrast of warmth. Using these tools keeps your hands steady, clean, distant from what is consumed. There is a comfort in the separation, a small barrier against cold, against mess, against exposure. Somewhere beneath that comfort lingers the sense that this distance was not always welcome, that closeness once mattered more than cleanliness. As you eat, the sounds are muted, a gentle scrape, a soft tap, nothing sharp or sudden. The rhythm of the movements matches the quiet around you. Outside, winter holds the land still, and inside, this small ritual mirrors that restraint. Long ago, hands met food directly, sharing heat and texture, but also sharing risk. Cold air punished bare skin, and hunger made speed feel necessary. These tools softened that exchange, creating space where survival could slow. There's a faint memory carried in the motion, not clear enough to name, only felt. A hesitation that once surrounded these objects, a suspicion attached to their shape. Metal was thought to interfere, to offend something unseen, to place distance where humility was expected. That fear has thinned with time, leaving behind only the habit. You lift, cut, guide without awareness of the old tension that once lived in the same gesture. The food itself is simple, meant to sustain rather than impress. Dense bread, thick broth, something meant to hold warmth inside the body when the world outside refuses to offer it. The tools help ration that warmth, guiding it carefully, conserving energy. In winter, nothing is wasted, not effort, not heat, not movement. Each bite arrives measured, deliberate, shaped by generations who learned that care was a form of endurance. Your posture remains relaxed, shoulders lowered, movements unhurried. Eating is not rushed here. It is a pause that fits neatly between other obligations, marked by repetition rather than choice. The tools assist in maintaining that order, keeping the act contained. They help define where the body ends and the world begins, a boundary that winter teaches harshly. Cold respects no one who reaches too far, too carelessly. The surface beneath your hands is rough wood, holding traces of age. It has supported meals like this before, countless times, under different names, different beliefs. The tools have changed shape slightly over centuries, but their purpose remains steady. They protect the eater from excess, from disorder, from vulnerability. What was once argued over is simply used, folded into the background of daily survival. As the meal continues, there is no sense of ceremony, yet the repetition itself feels structured. Lift, pause, chew, breathe. The tools guide the pace, preventing urgency. In colder months, restraint keeps the body from exhausting itself. Energy is saved for when it is needed elsewhere. Eating becomes less about pleasure and more about alignment with the conditions that surround you. When the plate empties, there is no reflection on the tools left behind. They rest where they belong, quiet, obedient. Their presence has shaped the meal without demanding attention. What once carried fear has become invisible through use. The body accepts their help without question, the same way it accepts shelter, clothing, routine. Winter has a way of teaching which things matter and which questions no longer need asking. You remain seated for a moment, hands resting, warmth settling inward. The tools have done their work, and so have you. Nothing remarkable has occurred, yet something enduring has been reinforced. A pattern continues, unchallenged, passing gently through time. The cold remains outside, the room holds, and the quiet carries on, supported by habits older than memory, steady enough to disappear. Clean hands carry a weight that feels heavier than cleanliness alone. When you rub warmth back into your fingers, there is a quiet sense that you are doing something correct, something approved. The cold air presses against your skin, sharp and dry, making every movement deliberate. You notice how water on your hands feels almost ceremonial, a pause that asks for attention. The gesture feels older than comfort, older than knowledge of illness. It holds the echo of rules that once governed survival in close, crowded spaces. In winter, bodies stay near one another, breath mixes in narrow rooms, and the scent of wool, wood smoke, and damp earth settles into everything. You sense that order matters here, even in small actions. Hands are wiped before touching food, before sharing tools, before resting near another person. It is not explained, it simply feels necessary. The cold does not forgive carelessness, and neither does the memory carried in these habits.
Cleanliness feels like a form of respect offered to the space and those within it. Polite movements follow the same quiet logic. You lower your voice without being asked. You wait even when hunger presses gently from inside. There is a rhythm to how people pass one another, how bowls are handed, how eyes briefly meet and then soften away. These gestures feel steady, rehearsed over generations, shaped by long winters where harmony kept warmth from escaping. Courtesy feels like insulation, something that keeps tension from cracking the fragile balance of shared shelter. Your hands, once warmed, rest still for a moment. The stillness feels familiar, as if waiting has always been part of the process. In the past, waiting